possible entities that we may have, and it is not that these are the entities, or probably there could be few more, one or two, like something like an association of person under the Income Tax Act, or a HUF under the Income Tax Act. But broadly, just to cover maximum businesses in India, these are the entities which are there. So first entity is the sole proprietor that we have. We also call it as a proprietorship business. Then we have got a partnership firm formed under the Indian Partnership Act. We have got the LLP, Limited Liability Partnership, which is a combination of the features of a company and a partnership firm. Then we have got a company. I've specifically mentioned it is for a commercial purpose. Second is then we have got a trust, society, and a company for a social purpose. So broadly, businesses or activities are done in India through these entities, right? Now, since we have got 2 days, and on the second day that we are going to discuss the post incorporation activities for a company, our objective is very clear that we are moving towards company. Okay. Only thing is we are just or the ultimate objective. So the destination is fixed. The journey is the comparison, is basically what I'm trying to say. So in this particular aspect of the points of comparison, we will be discussing quite a few. Yeah, there is an FPO. Okay, so means it is not clear, but what is FPO? Okay, you can just put it. I'll just reply to that. Yeah, so
farmer producer company.
Yeah, farmer producer company as well. So that is also one entity, but that is a very, now if we see, just for the purpose of example, it can be a non-banking financial company. Okay, there could be a Nidhi company, there could be probably a chit fund company, right? But broadly, what I'm trying to say is the FPO is definitely, it may fall under probably a commercial or a social activity, because objective would be different. But we have also these separate class of entities which are diversified by the type of business they do, right? So that is a very important point. Like NBFCs, gold loan NBFCs, or equipment finance NBFCs, or a loan finance NBFC. So these are very different ways in which they do business, and they are identified. Now for that particular business, there could be a requirement of incorporating in a form of a particular type of an entity. So I agree to that. FPO is one type of an entity. Yeah. If at all I'm coughing, don't worry. It is not nothing to do with COVID-19. It is just that my throat, there is, you can say, I'm not well, but that is only because of my throat. I have got medically, I have checked. So yeah. So we move on to the next point. Yeah, so these are actually the very important points which we as law professionals are required to consider when we are going to consult to our clients, or you can say the entrepreneurs, or whenever you are interacting with any entrepreneur. Please don't always think it from a chartered accountant perspective, or a lawyer perspective, or a company secretary perspective. Whatever we have studied very legal aspects. We are studying very legal aspects. You need not absolutely think from only that aspect. You need to have a business mindset when you are talking to a businessman. You need to have an entrepreneur mindset when you are talking to an entrepreneur. You need to think it from a business perspective, and then you need to fit it in the law. Okay, I hope you all are able to understand what I'm trying to say. You need to first understand what is the need of your prospective client, what your client exactly needs, right? You cannot offer what you are offering as a service. Your services should fall under his needs, right? So it is something like, you go to a grocery shop and you are asking for something which is not there in the grocery shop, and the shopkeeper is forcing you to buy something, right? So you as a seller, or as a service provider, you need to understand what is the need of the customer, right? So first thing, right, whenever you are discussing whether you go for a sole proprietary or a partnership firm or anything, any entity that we just mentioned, first thing that you need to understand is what is the nature of business and what is the proposed activity, right? Like something like, for example, there could be a business which is like, it may not be a business, but it could be a service. Like the service would be a chartered accountant firm, right? Now, under the Chartered Accountants Act, Companies Act, you can only form a chartered accountant firm either as a sole proprietor, partnership firm, or a LLP. You don't have any other option. You can't form it as a form of trust, society, or a company. So all these options are eliminated. So it is very much possible that by business activity, some options are eliminated, right? So that you need to consider when you are considering the business or the activity. Or there could be certain businesses where you need to have an entity in that specific organization itself, right? For example, if you want to do a lending activity, or you are engaging in a activity which is in a particular sector or in a particular kind of a business, then at that point of time you need an entity which is either a LLP or a company, right? So these are some important points that you need to understand the proposed business activity of the entity. It is not only from the perspective of eliminating the type of you can say the business entities. It is also important from the perspective of whether it is a commercial activity or a commercial activity or a social activity. I'll give you my very recent example with when I was communicating with few entrepreneurs, is that they were doing a social activity of reuse of certain you can say whatever we have it in our house, they were using it for recycling and reuse. And till date, for last 12 months, they were doing a very social activity. They were engaged in a social activity, and they were considering it whether they want to make it commercial or not. So the question was whether they form it as a trust or a company, or a Section 8 company, or a company as a commercial purpose. So when you are consulting them, you cannot just say that no, you form a company, you form an LLP or a trust. It is not that simple. You need to understand. Otherwise, you may form it as a social entity, and that would be you can say a commercial activity which will be violating certain other regulations or any other law or some income tax provision. So you need to be very clear about understanding the business of that entity. Okay. There is some chat. Okay, yeah. So I hope you all are trying to understand the importance of the first point itself, right? Which is the business or the business activity or the proposed activity of the entity. So when you are discussing this point, the first point with your client, that time you yourself get clarity that yes, are they clear about the business? Are they clear about what they have to form an entity? Because there are you'll not imagine, but there have been so many occasions when you communicate with your client, then the client thinks it from that perspective. अरे इसमें commercial भी हो सकता है, अरे इसमें कुछ ज़्यादा ही हम social सोच रहे हैं, right? So you have to be very clear, because your clarity will bring more clarity to the client, right? So yeah, social entrepreneurs, there's one question: social entrepreneurs do private company or trust? I'll get back to your question in just some time, because there is another type of an entity. I'll come to your question. Surely I'll come to your question. Yeah, then the next point is number of people involved as owners. So when I say owners over here, I mean to say owners who are going to invest in the entity, right? It generally happens that there are 2-3 owners at the start of the venture that are there. So but it may happen that there could be just an investor, but he doesn't know anything about the business. It may be a relative, maybe somebody's grandfather or father or uncle, or maybe somebody else, and they were just investing. So probably they may be called as owners, but they may not be called as managers. So managers are basically the people who take the day-to-day decisions of the entity. It may happen, like just take an example of quite a few entities where the money has been invested by certain class of people. Out of the investors, there are 1 or 2 who are running the business, and there are few more who are just part of the day-to-day operation, something like a CEO. CEO generally means generally, not always. He is just a professional person who is rendering the services of management, but in certain cases, probably somebody from the promoter group would be a CEO. Yeah, so this is very important. Like when you are deciding whether it should go for a company or an LLP, you need to understand how many people are actually investing, how many people are actually running the business of the entity, so that will give you some clarity from the perspective of which entity is better, right? Sometimes you have to not just see, okay, usme three owners or two managers and that's it. It's not like that. Sometimes you need to understand the relationship between the owners and the managers. If it is a family entity, probably just to avoid any kind of dispute, you may suggest some different type of an entity, right? In certain cases, you may have a you can say an entity. You may have a different entity where there is a very clear understanding between. Yeah, there is a bit of voice problem, but I'm ensuring that I'm well connected to the internet. Sorry for if for any inconvenience. Yeah, I hope you all have at least understood the, you can say, the second and the third point with respect to the managers and owners, right? I'm more accustomed to classroom teaching, and therefore probably I'm asking these questions. But I hope I have conveyed, and I just don't want to invest or waste a lot of time in discussing the same point. Yeah, now the fourth point is very critical. Yeah, managers point. Okay, so managers point are basically, you need to understand who and how many people are actually involved in running the business, right? You need to understand whether it is going to be a business that will be run by only 2 people and invested by 10 people or 6 people, right? So that will give you an idea about whether you go for if it is a commercial activity, whether you go for a company or whether you go for an LLP, right? Yeah, this is also important from the perspective of assigning powers after the company or LLP. Now, since it is, I'm just presuming for the timing that it is a commercial activity, and if that is the case, then because your document should also speak the same, right? If he's a manager, then probably he will be called as a designated partner under the LLP. If it is a company, then he will be called as a director. So you may accordingly draft documents, and therefore understanding this manager owner is very important. I'll give you one small example. Under the Section 8 company, which is not for profit organization under the Companies Act, when you form an entity and when you actually pay remuneration to the directors of the Section 8 entity, there may not be any problem under the Companies Act if you are paying a remuneration which is a reasonable remuneration because you are not into a commercial activity. But there are certain objections which are raised by the income tax authority when they go for an application under Section 80G or Section 10A of the Income Tax Act. I'm not fully conversant with the Income Tax Act, but generally I'm just aware with one or two sections which is relevant for such kind of activity. So what happens is that the income tax authorities say that you are the owner, you are the manager, and you are taking donations from public at large. So it is not correct that you are taking public money and you are remunerating yourself. So at that point of time, this owners managers becomes very critical, and that time you can accordingly design and ensure that the remuneration may also be paid, which is a reasonable remuneration, and at the same time you get a registration under the Income Tax Act when you accept the donation. So I'm saying it. So what I'm saying, it is not just it is not just under the Companies Act or a LLP Act or maybe some act, but you have to see this from a very broader perspective. Right? Yeah. The fourth point which we have is with respect to the taxation. I think so. Yeah, you can come to the earlier slide. Yeah. So the fourth point is with respect to the taxation. This is a very critical aspect, and probably in India, this is one of the one of the or the only reason when it comes to selecting an entity which is the most tax efficient entity. Now, under the Income Tax Act, there have been quite a few. Just 1 minute. There is one question. So, is it the count of managers and owners decide it's company commercial or social or an LLP? Yeah, not just count. It is sometimes even their roles that have been assigned, or not just the count. Means what role will be given to which person is also important. Therefore, that is to be considered. Yeah, now to just come back to the point of taxation, this is very critical to just find out a very tax efficient entity. I'm not fully conversant with some income tax provisions, very much in minute, but in the recent budget, the government had announced three types of tax slabs for the companies. One was 15%, one was 22%, and 25%. Earlier, we had straightforward 30% tax for the entities, right? If you compare this with LLP is taxed at a higher rate, right? But whenever, obviously, when you're seeing these entities from the perspective of taxation, the promoter, director, or maybe the owner or managers would be seeing it from the perspective, mostly from the perspective of that if at all I withdraw money from the entity, then how much I will be taxed, right? So if under the Companies Act, for private companies, there is no limit on remuneration. So if a company makes a profit of 10 lakh rupees and the directors take a remuneration of say 8-9 lakh rupees, whatever as they have approved, then probably they will be taxed on the limited front. But on the next, in case of companies, that is in the case of companies. But that is not the same case in the case of LLPs. In LLPs, there is a limit on the remuneration that you can pay to your partners, right? And once you pay that remuneration to your partners up to a certain limit, after that, once they receive the remuneration, suppose the company makes a profit of 10 lakh rupees, and you can take a salary or a remuneration up to say 60%, right? And after 60%, say there are two partners that take 3 lakh each as a remuneration. Now that 3 lakhs will be taxed in the hands of the person who receives, right? Or that person will be taxed, and it will be a deduction for the partnership firm or the LLP, because partnership firm and LLPs are considered the same from the perspective of the Income Tax Act. Now, the 4 lakhs that is left with the entity is the point where we have to consider dividing it between it will be taxed in the hands of the partnership firm or the LLP. So there is another slab for such entities. So this is a very important aspect. When you are considering this taxation aspect, you have to consider it sometimes also from the prospective revenues which the entities may earn over a period of time, right? So this is an important aspect. I may not go into the details, but I've just highlighted few points when it comes to the taxation aspect of it. Now there is one aspect with respect to the funding requirements. Yeah. Questions at the end of the session. Okay. Yeah. So then come to the funding aspect. Now, funding requirement, you may ask your entrepreneurs or the business owners that do you expect any funding over a period of say 2 to 5 years, right? Don't always think it from say 12 months or 6 months, right? Anything can happen, and probably today I don't need funding, but maybe after say 6, 8, 10 months I may need funding because business scenario has changed. So always ask it from a perspective of say 3 years or 5 years, and then ask about the funding requirement. Yes, if it is a funding requirement, it is desirable that you form you can say a separate legal entity, which can either be an LLP or a company, right? At that point of time, don't probably think of a partnership firm or a sole proprietary or any other entity where the person is one and the same, or there is no separate legal entity. But funding requirement is one aspect which is very important aspect, and you can go one step ahead. You can ask that, have you identified a person who is going to fund you? Because generally when I'm starting a business, I talk to many people, and I know that there will be some investor who would be interested in my business idea. Then I tell them that, are you going to invest? Then probably, yes, I agree that I will be investing, but maybe after the product is developed. So it may take 6 months for the product to develop, but I've at least got some understanding. So sometimes, in our first, second meeting or third meeting, you can also tell your client or your entrepreneur, your friend entrepreneur or business owners that, if you want, I will give you a set of questions. You ask this to the person who's going to fund you, and then you can then we can have a meeting, or probably you can convey the answer. So this funding requirement filters out which entity you have to form, right? Yeah. This is again in relation to the next point, which is the special rights to the investors, again in relation to the funding requirement. So that if he's going to invest, then whether he's going to have a special rights in the as a shareholder, as a director, that you need to consider, or probably as a kind of a partner when he's going to actually invest in the entity. Yeah. So we can move to the next slide. I'll take all your questions definitely. Yeah, nature of ownership. Now, yes, nature of ownership. Nature of ownership is important because you need to understand that actually, if you see sole proprietary firms and partnership firms, the ownership is virtually, there is no ownership, because whatever you access is yours, right? There is nothing in between. Even in the case of LLPs, sole proprietary firms, LLPs and partnership firms, there is nothing between you and the entity. It is just one and the same. The only thing, when you have it a company, that time if I'm investing in the company, I'm actually investing in the shares of the entity. So there is something in between me and the company which actually signifies the ownership. Yeah, if you could announce that, there will be. Yeah, so there is okay, the time of the, like, we have got more 5 minutes, so we'll just break in some time, and we will just come back. So can we take for at least more 2 minutes till we have got the time? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so the nature of ownership is very important. You also need to understand from the perspective of the entrepreneurs, that are they willing to have it in a form of shares, which signifies that. Now, what is the importance of having shares? Is basically the shares can be valued separately, right? Means therefore, under the valuation, you have got, you can value your entity and you can value your shares, right? You have got something what is called as a business valuation, and then you have got a share valuation. So when you are discussing, or when you're thinking about the ownership, in my view at least, it is only the company that you can have these two kinds of valuation. If I'm running a LLP and I want to sell my LLP, then I'll value my LLP and I'll sell it holistically, right? But if I want to partly sell my the company, I can sell it by selling, say, 5%, 10%. You would have heard all these deals with respect to the Flipkart and quite a few entities in the recent past, right, where they have sold the stake. Or you can even take the classic examples of public sector undertakings. How does disinvestment take place? Disinvestment takes place by sale of shares. So this disinvestment doesn't take place in partnership firms, LLPs, sole proprietaries, because once you sell your entity only. You don't sell anything other than the entity.
Sir, shareholder change.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, I'm not saying that shareholders will not change or anything like that, but yes, shareholders can sell the shares, is what I'm trying to say. I'm not saying that there is an ultimate or a complete restriction on the shareholder to sell, but that is one aspect with respect to it. Yeah. Then we come to the transferability, the exit options. Yeah, in exit options, you can have quite a few exit options. Generally, in the case of companies, taxation aspect is there, that if you want to exit, that if you transfer the shares, then there is an aspect of capital gain. If you buy back the shares, there is an aspect of capital gain. So all these aspects are also to be considered. And obviously, when there is a transfer, there is an aspect of consideration, and then there is a stamp duty impact also. If I'm selling my entire partnership firm to some other person, then there would be you can say, a wholesome consideration. My entire business is sold, and there could be a stamp duty impact on that as well. See, I hope you're trying to see that we are presently forming an entity. that in 2020 May we are forming an entity, but we are thinking it from the perspective of transferability, exit options, and taxation. So just imagine how much or what things need to be deliberated with the person with whom you are communicating as a law professional, to make him more educated about this entire stuff. Otherwise, what will happen is that at every point of time, the entrepreneur will come to you with some query, and you will be like, why is asking me so many queries? So at the start, one or two meetings, you need to have this discussion so that there is clarity, and he is also very comfortable to run the business over a period of time. Yeah, there is one more aspect with respect to the FDI norms. Now, FDI, foreign direct investment in India, is allowed in registered partnership firms to some extent, in LLPs and companies, right? There are separate norms for that. There are separate sectors for which how much investment can be there. But generally, on my experience, the foreign investors are more comfortable if they invest in a company, because their rights are protected. There is a specific, you can say, there is a specific a jurisdiction with respect to shareholders' rights. They can file a case in NCLT with respect to in case of dispute. There is clarity as well as confusion about management and shareholders dispute, but therefore probably the foreign investors prefer that. There are two more points, but we will just join after a short break, and probably we may discuss some more points about FDI if there are any. So just in just some time we will join. Thank you.
Concern for the entrepreneur. Then the next point is with respect to the liabilities. So liabilities could be one, right? Like whether there is a limited liability or an unlimited liability. So in case of sole proprietary firm or a partnership firm, there is no limit on the liability. Actually, if we see the limit, the LLP Act, there is unlimited liability in case of fraud. It is not like that, there is limited liability in all cases. So in certain cases, the liability is also unlimited. In case of private companies, to give you an example, under the Income Tax Act, liability of directors of a private company is that of, if the company fails to pay the tax, then it is the directors who may be liable to pay the tax. So, it is not a very simple way in which the liability is very simple to bifurcate or distinguish between the separate entities. Often very limited, but in certain cases, the liability is also not right. You have to think all these factors collectively and suggest an appropriate form of business. If a person is very serious about doing business, then probably he may have to think only between a company or a LLP. Now you may ask, sir, why are you always moving towards a company or a corporate kind of structure? The answer is because if you see the history of any country, not just India, of any country, you may not see a individual running business for 100 years or 200 years, right? Not, I mean, there could be exceptions to what I'm saying, but you may not see an individual running a business for 200 years. You may have quite a few corporate houses which are running business for, say, maybe 100 years, 150 years, 200 years, over a period of time, not just in India, but anywhere in the world. Now, how is this possible is only because of the concept of a limited liability and a perpetual succession. And then there is even the concept of change of ownership. Therefore, we have got these business houses running the entity. So therefore, that is the purpose of having this kind of a structure, which is the LLP structure, the company structure or the LLP structure. Yeah. So we'll move on to the next points, but definitely, as said earlier, I will be very eager to take your questions as well. Yeah. So now, if you have decided to go ahead with the company structure, then you have got two options. whether you go it as a private company or a public company. Now, private companies are not that simple private companies which we had it earlier, right? Which we had it earlier under the Companies Act 1956. Under the Companies Act 2013, there are further bifurcation or there is further classification of private companies. You can have it as a small company. There are thresholds on the share capital and turnover. You can have a one-person company. So there was one question asked, but just to take this point forward, one person company is one member company, right? The company formed by one member and he is the only director or there is some other person as a director. Interestingly, if you come to the earlier point with respect to the members and directors, the member managers or owners, number of managers, in case of OPC, there is only one owner, and in case of managers, there could be n number of managers that may be there. So you can have 12 directors, one member. In the case of OPC, you can have one member, one director in the case of OPC, because there is just a requirement of one member. And as we discussed earlier, he should be a citizen and a resident of India. Then we have got a startup. So startup can also get registered, but start under the Companies Act, you don't register it as a startup. You register it as a private company, and then you separately register it under the DIP regulations on the Startup India portal of the government. So that is with respect to the startup. And yeah, if it is none of the above, then it is just a private company. It doesn't fall. Now you will ask, sir, why do we need further three classification? The reason is because further four classification. The reason is because the Companies Act and few other legislations provide exemptions to certain class of companies. So small company has got certain exemptions under the Companies Act. OPCs have got some exemptions. Startups have got exemptions under the Companies Act, Income Tax Act, labor laws, and quite a few laws. And certain entities which don't fall under that are just companies, private companies, and everything is applicable, which is applicable to the private company. Now, just for the students or the professionals who have gone through the provisions of the Companies Act or may go through the provisions of the Companies Act, there is a notification of the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, which is dated 5th of June 2015. And there are certain exemptions given to private companies. And interestingly, there are certain exemptions given to small companies and the further classification. You can just go through those provisions to understand more what is applicable and what is not applicable to the private. Then you can also form it as a public company, but please understand that though I have mentioned it as a listed entity, when you form a public company, means you cannot form a, yeah. Can you repeat the name of the notification? Yeah, actually, means there is no name, but it is a MCA notification dated June 5, 2015. 5th June 2015 notification. And on that date only, you have got exemptions that are given to the government company, Nidhi company, Section 8 company, and private companies. So on the same date, there are quite a few exemptions given to these types and classes of companies. Yeah, because to again just now I may go to the provisions of Companies Act, but Companies Act 2013 was applicable from 1st April 2014. And from that day, there was no bifurcation between a private company and a public company. The act was entirely applicable to the all types of companies. Like if you see the previous act, there was a specific exemptions given to the two types of companies. Now under this act, on 5th of May 2015, that is almost after 12, 14 months, you have got an exemption, and that is that exemption of 5th of 5th of June 2015 notification. And it has been revised on 13th of June 2017. But you will get it, means if you download that, the changes would be incorporated in the provisions. Just 1 minute. There is a problem in the mobile. The battery is low, so just 1 minute, please. Sorry. Yeah, sorry for the interruption, but the battery was low, and actually the battery is low. I just got a charger. Okay, so fine. Can we move to the next part? Yeah, sorry. I thought it is an interactive. Yeah. Okay, so now we come to the social purpose, the companies with having social purpose. So you can now, there is a specific provision under the Companies Act 1956 also, and as well as Companies Act 2013. There was a provision under Section 25, Section 25 of Companies Act 1956, which said that you can have a company not for profit, and under the Companies Act 2013, the corresponding provisions of Section 8. So generally, you may have a company which is called as a Section 8 company, and that Section 8 company is a company which is having the purpose. Just 1 minute, actually, this is. Yeah, so these are the companies which are formed with an objective of promoting art, science, commerce, sports, education, and social welfare, religion, charity, or protection. So broadly, these are the objects. These are not the only objects that the Section 8 company can have, but such companies can have these objects. So just to give you an example, you can correlate a Section 8 company with the CSR activities for the purpose of this particular. Using one aspect with respect to in the first slide, you had options like a trust society and a Section 8 company. So the distinguishing factor between these social enterprises, because there was one question about social entrepreneurs, I may answer it now, is that how governed are these three entities by the law? How well recognized are these three entities by the law? So just to give you an example, we have got the Maharashtra Education Society, it is a society. We have got Deccan Education Society, it is also a society. We have got ILS as also a society. So these are societies formed under the respective provisions. There are quite a few trusts which are formed under the Act, generally the temples or maybe some other aspect. Yeah, so there is, can social companies raise funds from VC, venture capital? To some extent, yes, they can. There is no restriction per se for that. I'll just come to a question, maybe more in detail. So generally, these are the only point with respect to Section 8 company is that you can have the money in the form of share capital. And the owners gets the shares in the entity. That is the only one of the distinguishing factors between the three social enterprises, which may be the key. Now, what could be the objects? They have to stick only to the object that I've given over here, that is promoting arts and commerce, education, research, social welfare, or protection of environment. That is one. And the second point is that they need to apply the profits for promoting its objects, and they cannot pay dividends. So they cannot remunerate the shareholders, they cannot reward the shareholders in some other manner, right? So that is one. These are the three restrictions. And for such companies, there is per se no restriction on raising capital, right? However, there is a restriction from the perspective of the government. One of the restrictions for the government is that you cannot have a special right for an investor. That is one important aspect which is there. Like for example, can you issue DVR in Section 8? That is differential voting rights. That say the owners are having some rights as a shareholder, and the maybe the investor is having some different rights. That is not possible in case of Section 8 company. So it is you cannot have any special rights for any. In fact, in the Articles of Association, when we incorporate a Section 8 company, we have to exclude all the provisions with respect to the buyback, dividend, or bonus shares, forfeiture of shares, lien. All these provisions are to be deleted. You have to just put a plain, simple Articles of Association. One share, one vote, or one member, one vote, and that's it. You cannot have a lot of detailed provision in the Articles of Association. So I hope I have answered your question in the process, because can they have funds from VC? Answer is yes, they can have, but they cannot use special rights to the venture capital. That is what I'm trying to say. Yeah. Then we come to the next point. Now, these companies, generally, if we come to the earlier point, it says that you have got public company, private company, and generally in the name of that company, you have got private limited or limited in its name. In case of Section 8 company,
So,
you don't
sir,
have
sir, just
limited
to,
or
sorry to interrupt, but I think you are not audible and not visible on the Vivek's station. So, could you just see that what's happening over there?
yeah, actually, I have tried to switch on my mobile and also charge it, but there is some problem. So, if possible, can you? There is some problem in my mobile. Very sorry.
Okay. So, no, there's a problem in your mobile, right?
Yeah, it means just sometime back there was some problem. So yeah, it has switched off actually.
Okay, okay, okay. I'll inform Vivek. Okay. You can continue the session.
Yeah, very sorry. Means I'm trying to start, but I'll try to connect, but in the session it will be difficult for me to connect.
Okay, okay. I'll tell him. You may continue the session. Okay.
Yeah, very sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
If you want, should I wait for 2 minutes for them to join so that they may not miss?
Okay, you may wait. I'll inform other participants who are on this session, so they could join.
Yeah, very sorry.
Hello, sir. Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please go ahead. That will be great.
Actually, what I seen, there are a lot of young people who are starting a social enterprise,
Yeah.
And they are like coming up with some solution on the community problem. But what I seen, like they are registering a private limited company, and also they are pitching into the VC forums for the fund, to for their operations or to go to the next level sort of stuff. So they are like registering themselves under Section 8, or those are the regular private limited company, and they are telling like we are a social enterprise company.
Yeah, so generally to give you some you can say some more insight into this, what happens actually that these social entrepreneurs are actually entrepreneurs. Means, just to give you an example, out of 100%, their objective of doing business activity, that is commercial activity, is around 60-70%, and their objective of doing maybe a social activity is just 30-40%. And to fit this into only one entity, they form it as a private company, because there is no restriction for a private company to do a social activity. Therefore, they are doing this under a particular structure with respect to the private companies. So, if you portray to the investors that you are doing a commercial activity as well as a social activity, then there is a possibility that you may get funding, and therefore they do this activity.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
But means I hope I have answered your question. Means I have answered your question, but is it up to your satisfaction? If not,
Yes,
then you can
of
ask.
course. No, yes, I got your point.
Yeah, so they use it as a combination.
Yeah. I think it's more likely to the a sort of marketing part of it also, where they get some
right,
social
exactly,
kind of stuff.
Exactly. In fact, my experience has been, means what I suggest to these entrepreneurs is that you keep your social activity separate and you keep your commercial activity separate, because it may happen that your social activity may eat up the revenue and the profits of your commercial activity, and your commercial activity profits may come down. Come down, profits, not just profits, your activities will come down. So they may do it in a small venture, one in the form of an LLP and another in the form of a company. One may in the form of a private company, second in the form of a Section 8 company. So that is better, so that you develop as a brand also. Because what I have not discussed from the perspective of this particular session is that you have to also think it from the perspective of branding. That is one thing which, as law professionals, we don't do it, right? We all everything see it from, whether it is tax efficient, compliance efficient, and all these aspects. We don't see it from the perspective of branding. And the entrepreneurs, 99% sees it from the perspective of, yeah, okay, so my voice is not audible. Yeah, is it audible now?
Yes, for me it's audible.
Yeah, so is that one thing that we have not discussed about banking. So actually don't, yeah, we actually don't.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, when say
Okay.
I am audible, then we can hear you, but later your voice get break.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Very sorry. So what I was giving the point is, again coming back to the first slide, when you're deciding, the entrepreneur has got only 2-3 things in his mind. First is branding, second is tax efficient, and third is easy way of getting it incorporated and getting started. So that is one aspect with respect to the incorporation. So one more point is, so we as consultants or law professionals, we have to see it from their perspective. So branding is one. Sometimes I'll give you one example. One of my friends came and told me, I want to be the managing director, so I want to form a company. So I said, why you want to? Well, like, do you know what managing director does? He says no, but I know. I want it on my visiting card. I want to tell to the world that I am the managing director of my company. So that's it. So only one perspective, that how you portray to the world, right? All these are some practical perspectives which are there. Okay, coming back to Section 8 company. These Section 8 companies, as discussed earlier, they don't have a private limited or a limited in their name. So they have got the wordings at the end of the name, either as foundation, forum, association, federation, chamber, confederation, council. So these are the broadly the names that it may have in its name, at the end of it, that it may have. If you have any questions, please ask, because the next slide which we have, I think so, is about the procedure. But Section 8 company, generally, I feel in the present scenario, if you read the rules under the CSR, corporate social responsibility, Section 8 companies are the companies through which you can do social, you can do CSR activity and a recognized CSR activity. If you're doing it from an entity which is not associated with the group of companies, then it should have a track record of last 3 years. Now, just to give you one more reference, this is still in draft and still in the discussion process. Is that that CSR rules are in the process of being revised, and the government may in the draft rule, it has eliminated the trust from doing the CSR activity. So what is recognized is only Section 8 company. Yeah, Tata Trust, a social purpose company. No, not actually. Tata Trust is a public charitable trust, as far as I understand. There is Tata Sons Limited, which is a unlisted public company, which was in the process of getting it converted into private company. Yeah, can you please repeat the explanation of CSR? Yeah. So with respect to CSR that I was referring to, yeah, but I'll come to the aspect of CSR. But I hope you all have got that answer. Mr. XYZ was asking one question about Tata Trust. So Tata Trust is a public charitable trust that I've already explained. But many CSR activities get done through the Tata Trust. Yes, it will get done because that is a trust, and till now, it is trust is a recognized entity. As on date, still in the draft rules, there is a provision where you can get. There are three entities through which you can do CSR: society, trust, and Section 8 company. So therefore, this aspect with respect to Tata Trust can do the activity of CSR. Means not just Tata Trust, any trust. Okay. So Rashi has asked a question. Can you repeat the explanation about CSR? Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is that presently under the CSR regulations, Section 8 company is recognized as a vehicle through which you can do the CSR activities. Okay. However, it is not the trust. Presently, it is Section 8 company, society, and trust. Now, in the draft rules, which are yet to be notified, so the government is still in the discussion phase, is that they are eliminating societies, they are eliminating trusts from the CSR activity, and they are recognizing the Section 8 companies. So, probably if the rules are notified, then the trust may not be able to do the social activity. And I don't know the reason. I feel it has been very established. Trusts are there, I think so, from 1880. So therefore, I think that should not be a problem. But I feel the rules may not consider that. So let's wait for it. Okay, so I hope isn't the Section 8 company being recognized in the yes, Section 8 company is being recognized for CSR activities, whether under the present rules or even under the draft rules. There is no question about Section 8 company. Section 8 company is recognized. With respect to the CSR, there is a draft provision where the trust may not be recognized. Section 8 company continues to be recognized. No, nothing on that aspect. Yeah, but what I have observed is that there are quite a few trusts who have made a representation to the government, and they have been asking the government not to have this kind of a provision for the CSR. I feel we can have a separate session, or somebody else can have a separate session on CSR, because CSR is very much more discussed than any other provisions of the Companies Act. In my view, there are only two provisions in the Companies Act which are most discussed. One is related party transaction, and second is the CSR provisions. Anyways, yeah. So we'll go to the next point. Next slide. Yeah. So yes. So I'll just come to this aspect. This is the steps in the formation of company. I will not make it. So please move it. Time is valuable. Okay, so I'll just take this for just 2 minutes. We have to find a unique name. The name should not be similar to the existing company, LLP and trademark. Once you submit the name is valid for 20 days. Submit as a new, once the name is approved, it is valid for 20 days. Then you prepare the next set of documents. Then you obtain the digital signatures. Then you obtain some more documents. You prepare the documents and submit it with the government. And after a review and approval, you get the certificate of incorporation, you get the income tax PAN, you get the income tax PAN, and some more registrations. In the recent times, you also open a bank account, so your bank account is also ready, and you start the not much of your time, but yeah. So next slide. Yeah, okay, great. So any questions, please I'll be more than happy to answer your questions. Yeah, any question on anything, even if it is not about company, that will be great. Means company as in company formation or any the point which you have that we were discussing.
Sir, can you please define the process of startup again in a very short, summarized manner?
What I have to discuss? Cost of startup?
Startup.
Or procedure
the
for
incorporation of
incorporation?
startup. Procedure. Yeah. In a very gested manner.
Please, procedure for incorporation, please speak in length, it's important. Okay, so can you come to the earlier slide? Yeah, so this is the process for incorporation. So for the first point, you have to find a unique name. So generally the name consists of two parts or three parts. First is the prefix, second is the activity, and third is the type of company. So something like, are there any specific banks where the accounts? Yeah, presently there are specific banks. As on date, as far as I understand, there are two banks. One is PNB and one is the ICICI Bank, where you have to open a bank account at the time of incorporation. Yeah, so I think so. Your question is more about startups. This company formation is just company formation is pretty standard. But when you actually make an application for startup on the startup portal, there is a provision where you get yourself registered. There are 3-4 slides or there are 3-4 pages under which you have to get registered and you have to fill up the information. The most crucial aspect for you with respect to startup registration is you need to prove that you are innovative and your object is something that aligns to the requirement of the business, and that is a very important aspect that you need to consider at the time of making startup application. But the startup application is always in two parts, because you get registered under DIPP, but getting registered under DIPP is not conclusive. You need to get further registered with the income tax authorities. I hope you are able to understand that point. Okay, this is for private company and for Section 8 company.
Yes,
Yes, exactly, Mr. Shivanand. What you are saying is correct. This is only for a Section 8 company and a private company, and it is not for a startup. For startup, after the certificate of incorporation PAN 10, you need to separately apply for a startup registration. Yeah, there is one point with respect to Apurva said, what are the advantages of unlisted public company? Yeah, actually, if you ask, virtually an unlisted public company has got, it can have members more than 200. The shares are freely transferable. And now this may be an advantage or may not be an advantage, but the shares of unlisted public company are in demat mode. So, the transferability of shares become easy. There is an aspect of stamp duty also. So these are the advantages of a unlisted public company. Yeah, so yeah, these are just 2 minutes are left. So if you have any questions, means I'm there here only, but maybe not through chat. What is the amount that you need capital for private company? Yeah, very important. This is one point which I have not discussed. Actually, this should have been a point of comparison. Is that when it comes to private company or a public company, now there is no concept of minimum capital. You can have a capital. You can have money even with 100 rupees or 200 rupees or maybe the highest possible capital that you can have.
Sir?
Yeah.
So if any company is not registered with the registrar of companies, then how are they supposed to pay taxes concerned to the revenues they have earned?
Yeah, so such companies are referred to as unregistered companies, and obviously, since there is a reference of an income that they're earning, it may be in some other unincorporated entity or an unregistered entity. So it can be in a form of an AOP or maybe in some other entity, and that entity will be liable to pay taxes.
So it can be also, they can also pay it as a sole controller, right?
Yeah, probably yes. That is also possible. Just one
Thank you,
minute.
sir.
My small request is, I think we can have a session for 5 minutes more in the next Zoom session. Is it fine? Because I mean there are quite a few questions.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. If the
And
participants agree, then
yeah,
definitely we can host another meeting. And if you guys agree, please say yes to the chat. We can have
yeah,
one more session.
because there are quite a few questions, and probably I also want to participate.
Okay. So we'll be back.
Yeah. If
Of just
if there
wanted
are
to
questions, please.
understand.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
From the last question, you said like unregistered company, right? So I just wanted to know if the company is not registered, then how I can open the bank account and also I can get the PAN card, right? So this will go on a individual name only, and on
Yes, yes,
individual
yes.
name only you have to pay the you have to file the ITR, and that way I think you have to pay the taxes.
Right. Actually, in my view, that is a bit of a risky affair to have an entity but not getting it registered. Generally, as rightly pointed by you, it may happen that uh, just 1 minute. Actually, there is one participant who is not part of the WhatsApp group, so I have to just send the link. So just 1 minute, please. Sorry. Yeah. So, with respect to the question, which is yeah. So, having that entity for the time being or initially, it's okay. Means just to start, it's fine. But not for the long-term perspective. It is not desirable to have an unregistered entity for a long time, because there are quite a few disadvantages, like not only with respect to payment of taxes, even with respect to the liabilities. You enter into a contract, but you don't have an entity, then what is the status of the contract and the liability? You will be personally held liable. So, not desirable to have an entity from a long-term perspective, unregistered entity. Yeah, I think so. There was one question, as far as I remember, in the earlier chat, that what are the features of memorandum of association and articles of association? So, memorandum of association has got 6 clauses. So, it has got the name clause in a single line. It has got the registered office clause also in a single line. It has got an object clause, and that is the entire purpose of the memorandum of association, where you have got the detailed objects with respect to a company, the main object and the ancillary objects, right? So main object generally focuses on what will be the, say suppose it is an IT, then probably everything in IT, or probably a company which may do anything in IT would be the case that will be mentioned in the main object. In the ancillary objects, anything which is ancillary or subsidiary or in relation to the main object will be mentioned in the next point. Then we have got the liability clause, and then we have got the subscription clause and the capital clause, which are there in the memorandum of association. In the articles of association, there is a reference to basically internal management of the company. So you may have a company who will be the chairman, who will be the managing director, who and how they will be appointed, what about decision making, what about the powers of the shareholders, how the voting will take place. So it is something like how, we have a building for, we have an agreement for our own building, and who will chair, who will vote, and who will be the chairman, secretary, something of that sort. So basically bylaws or you can say an internal arrangement which is codified, or sometimes you can also call it as a code of conduct. But these are non-technical or non-legal words. The legal phrase is articles of association. So that is one point which I remember, which I couldn't answer earlier. Can a private company convert unsecured loan into CCD? Okay. There are no provisions in MOA AOA. I need to check, but there is a provision under section 62 subsection 3 which talks about conversion of loan, but that is into shares. That is not into CCDs, or that is CCDs that are for the other participants. CCDs are
compulsory convertible debentures.
compulsory convertible debentures. Also, there is
So,
no
but with that,
provision.
the share capital gets altered, right? So,
Yeah.
wouldn't the consent of shareholders be required if you need to do that?
That means what?
Convert the
CCD.
unsecured loan into a compulsory convertible debenture, because a
Actually, if you
compulsory
see,
convertible debenture will eventually get turned into equity shares, right? So
yeah,
the equity share capital will be altered.
yeah, but that's what. Even I'm not able to recollect the provision under the Companies Act where you can convert loans into a CCD, because there is no provision under the section 71 which relates to debentures.
Yeah. Sir, one more question.
Yeah.
This is not regarding to the setup or anything, but since the introduction of ASBA, shouldn't the concept of forfeiture of shares be extinct, because there will be no failure of call money?
Very much possible, but actually forfeiture is not only in relation to ASBA only. See, suppose in ASBA you pay suppose it is a 10 rupee share, it is issued at 100 rupees, and you get a discount of say 5 rupees. So the issue price is 95, and the company asks you to pay 50 rupees at the time of application. And after
So, but
1
that
year you have
concept
to
doesn't
pay
exist
40.
only right now. Taking money in parts.
Yeah, that's what.
At least for public companies.
So there is a provision under ICDR that you can issue partly paid shares, but you have to fully pay or make them fully paid within a period of 18 months.
Okay.
So wherever there is a concept of partly paid shares, this
forfeiture has to be there.
Yeah, forfeiture should be there. Actually, what you have pointed out is correct. Forfeiture at some point of time becomes redundant. The moment the shares are fully paid, they are redundant. But you will not imagine, these are so old concepts.
Exactly. I asked the same thing to Anand Kankani sir. And he just told me to mail the institute why this is there.
Okay. No, but this forfeiture, actually, very frankly, I'll tell you, maybe I may diverting the topic, but in the recent times, to give you an example, because of this video conferencing, AGM and EGM, concept of proxy has become redundant. Because of board meeting through video conferencing, alternate director has lost its significance. So there are many provisions where you may not.
Which are basically redundant now because of other provisions and other technological advancements.
Exactly.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Yeah, Khushbu has asked one question. What will be the effect of a contract post incorporation entered before the incorporation? Yeah, those are typical pre-incorporation contracts. There is a provision under the Specific Relief Act. I think so. It is section 14 or section 17 of Specific Relief Act, which says about pre-incorporation contracts. So these contracts which are entered prior to the incorporation, they need to be approved and ratified by the board of directors, and then it becomes binding on the company. There is a specific provision. As far as I remember, there are 2 or 3 checkpoints. You can check. The answer is not in Companies Act. Answer is in Specific Relief Act. But as far as I remember, it should be approved and ratified by the board of directors there can be a provision in the Articles of Association with respect to pre-incorporation contracts, and it will be binding on the company. Okay. Shivanand ji has asked one question. What's the general cost of registration of a startup as a private company with 2 directors, and will CACS fee be annually? Okay. Yeah. So the basically registration cost for any company depends only on one thing, which is the share capital. And share capital is now very much flexible. It can be from 100 rupees to anything. Just taking an example, that if it is a private company with a authorized share capital of 1 crore, 1 lakhs or maybe 10 lakhs, the registration fee would be somewhere around, say, 7 to 8,000 max, and maybe the professional fees of the professional. What will the CACS fees annually? Now, very frankly, there is no standard formula to this fees, but CA fees are basically two types of fees. One is that with respect to the accounts and audit and the auditing services that he renders, and the CS fees are for the purpose of compliances, which are on a quarterly basis or on a yearly basis. So there is no definitely any formula to that, but depending now, the chartered accountant and company secretaries will charge the fee depending on the volume of transactions and compliances and overall. So I may not be able to tell you the fees for that aspect. Yeah. I think, yeah, any more questions? Any question means.
So, can we, if I have a proprietorship, so can I change it to the private limited company? Like, can I transfer it to the private limited?
Yeah, you can convert your sole proprietary into. There are actually two aspects to this. First is you keep your sole proprietary as a sole proprietorship only, and just now means your name is, say, Shivanand Kokate. So you have got SK Consulting as a sole proprietary, and you want to incorporate a company as SK Consulting Services Private Limited. Now there are two options. First, you keep your sole proprietary as sole proprietary even after your company gets incorporated. Okay, that is one. First option. Second option is you merge, or not merge, you convert your sole proprietary into a company. That is one. That is the second option. I may need to check, but there is a provision for such conversion of unregistered companies or not companies into a company. But to give you one very practical example, one very practical aspect of this conversion is that if you are converting, then there could be an aspect of stamp duty as well as income tax, because you are converting the entity structure, and all the assets liabilities that you have in your sole proprietary name would be in the name of the consulting entity. So that would amount to transfer, and probably income tax aspect may be considered, but you can just check with the chartered accountant once and think on this lines of conversion. I am of the view that you can have it in two forms, or you can have two entities, and you can do business either privately or sorry, you can do the business either individually as well as in the form of a company. If no question, then you can introduce tomorrow's session. Okay. Yeah, so tomorrow we will be meeting for some more deliberations, and these are post-incorporation activities. So we will be discussing about appointment of statutory auditor, maybe something about the funding aspect. We will be also discussing about some post-incorporation compliances, and maybe from post-incorporation that time till at least say the next 1 year, what activities are to be done, that I will be discussing. Okay. So great. Thank you all. Sorry for the disturbances from my end with respect to the voice, and also with respect to my mobile not working simultaneously. Thank you all. Thank you for your cooperation, and I look forward to meet you all tomorrow. Thank you so much.